There are a ton of questions about staffing. So if you submitted one of those, I will probably fold a bunch of them in. Please don't be offended if I don't read your exact question. But there are a lot of staffing questions. So I'm actually going to start with some of those. This one is for Senior Officer, Superintendent Cox and Senior Officer Diop. How do you anticipate reconciling the need you see to reduce staff with a staffing shortage? Sorry, I just started right there.
All right. Did you want to go first? You want me to? Yeah, I knew you were going to say that. All right. So I think as we look at where staffing shortages are in our schools, that's a big clue. That's a big clue and one that we, I believe, have ignored in the past, but we need to focus in on that. So where we're having staffing shortages is really important. I think as we look at the types of staff that we have across the board, we have to decide which ones are our MVPs. And then as we get further away from students, what those roles are and how we can incorporate those into other things in the district. So I think it's going to be very important for us to look where our shortages are as we go finish out this year, but also to really think about students in the center, and we look at that locus of control around there and how we are affecting students. So if you're a staff and you don't have direct contact with students, that's a factor we have to think about, honestly. I'm just going to be really honest with you. As we look at staff who are supporting teachers, how is that working? How does it feel? Is it something you need? Is it not something you need? So I think that's like a start to me as how we're going to have to approach this. Senior Officer Diop, do you have anything else?
Yes. And I always, when a question is asked and the superintendent is here, I always want to give her the opportunity to speak first. And then it is comfortable. It's comfortable for me. So, but I think that question is a really, really important one. It's a pivotal question because we're here precisely because of that equation. And so we've been, the board has talked about school transformation. We've said that we're set up as though we have 55,000 students when we have less than that. So then the solution of doing that is to see, and the other piece is that Minneapolis Public Schools has one of the, if not the, lowest ratio between certified staff to student. The state average is about 14, 15. We are at 9. So that means that if you have that low ratio, you automatically have way more staff than you need because you have to satisfy that low ratio. So that's what we have to, I think, solve to in terms of school transformation.
Yeah, I would agree. I think it's roles and what role people play and how we look at that. I think in education, I always say two things. We always think more is more. And then the other thing is when we look at our physical space, there's nobody better than educators to fill that space, right? So we are going to have to take a very hard look at where we are, what space we're using, and what staff we have for students, and what role they're going to play when we look at our strategic plan and our 5 priority strategies.
And so it sounds like you answered the question of how you're going to decide which staff to cut using that priority matrix. Another question that happened is how are the cuts going to happen? How are they happening?
Could you repeat the question?
Oh yeah, so the staffing decline, how is that going to happen? How are the staff going to be let go, I guess, is the question.
I would say on this one, I think that we would have to make sure that we use the strategic plan as our guiding document, put students first as to what are the needs for all students, not a segment, but all students district-wide. And our raison d'etre, the reason why we exist is to teach students. So we have to make sure that we have the optimal staff to do just that and do it in an efficient and effective way. Because, you know, a ratio of 9 to 1, really, I think the lowest ratio was in ancient Greece with Plato and Socrates. It was 1 to 1. But here we are, and we're not that far, 9 to 1. So
I think, too, when you think about budget cuts and cutting, there's cuts that happen at the central office level, and then there's cuts that happen at the school, right? And so we really try to give our schools the autonomy to know what works best for them. And when you listen to Tara and her, the way she does budgets, you can see how that process can lead you into making the decisions you need. We also need to, we started doing that at the department level and at the central office level too.
Thank you. One more question on this, and there might be more that I didn't read yet, but final question about this is, how do you communicate with the families to build trust?
I feel like that's something we've been trying to do all this past year. You know, I was talking to someone today and said, you know, when I listen to you, I keep hearing this sense of belonging. Like you're very focused on that people feel like they belong at MPS, right? And that's whether you're a staff person, you're an administrator, you're a family member, or you're a student. So I think we have to find ways that people feel like that they belong, and that takes place when you're a decision maker in our district, when you are able to give input. And I agree with you. I think the way we traditionally do it, sometimes we expect you to come to a parent advisory council or come to an event at the Davis Center. Those are sometimes not safe spaces for our families. And so when we look at that, that means that we all need to get out of our chairs and get ourselves to schools, get ourselves to community events to really hear, because that conversation isn't going to happen the first time you and I meet at a community event, right? But when we meet at the community event and then you send me an email or we see each other at drop-off, now the conversation starts to flow and I start to hear about what is important to you as a family member.
Thank you.
Okay.
There is one follow-up question. I am going to throw it in here. If the ratio is 9 to 1, why do we have 39 plus students in many middle and high school classes?
I'm looking at Tara because she can probably explain it better than I can. Do you want to start and then I'll fill in?
Yeah, I'll explain it from a building level. So in our building, we have social workers, counselors, teacher TOSAs that work to support like a whole team of EL teachers. We have an English language learner lead, for example, or a special ed lead, for example. So they're not directly in a classroom of students teaching, but they support a whole team to make sure that they are delivering appropriate instruction that is diverse, that is differentiated. And so when you take all those teachers and you do the math, the ratio changes. So the actual teachers sitting in a room with a classroom of students is much higher than the actual licensed staff in our building.
Yes, and when I spoke about that, I made it very clear that I'm talking about district-wide ratio certified teacher to student. I did not say ratio of certified staff in a classroom to students. So that's the difference that I wanted to make there.
I would just say too, right now we're going through a process called staffing adjustments. So as Tara talked about projected enrollment, we're actually really good at it, but sometimes there's a miss at a certain grade level or something like that. So we might have to move staff from one to the other. So that does happen as we move forward. I think also electives and how schools make their choices. Again, it is a constant pull for me about how much autonomy we give our schools, right? I could be very prescriptive, and in some points, you will hear me, I'm very prescriptive. When we talked about intervention triads, Principals will tell you, I did not want to budge, and I did not, on it being a teacher and 2 associate educators. That piece was important to me because I know I'm going to have to make a decision about that in January, so I needed some consistent data. Now, how you use those, the principal and the school know best how to serve their students. So I leave that to them. So I think it's a constant push and pull that we have about that autonomy at schools versus what prescriptively we're saying from a central office level about what schools need to do.
Thank you, everyone. Still about staffing, but a different tack. There's a couple different questions that I think are related potentially. There's been a needed push to recruit and retain BIPOC staff and teachers. As enrollment decreases and MPS needs to cut staff, how are you, Rochelle, and Superintendent Cox and Senior Officer Diop, protecting probationary teachers of color? How are you protecting staff of color?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think one of the ways that we're working on that is through our teacher contract and how we look at seniority and our collaboration with MFT as we move through that. So I think that's a work in progress as we try to work on that and try also not to break any laws as we do that, and also make sure that we are centered on what we feel is best while looking at systems that are not working for our BIPOC staff. I think that's one way. I think the other piece is as we're looking at how we retain people, and we're doing that through what we call our ABAR, our anti-bias, anti-racist committee that we have at the central office level. We actually have mentors that are supporting our BIPOC staff. We have affinity groups that we have so that people with shared experience can talk about what is happening in the district and what is not working for them in the district. Tara, I don't know if you want to give a perspective from the building level.
We deal a lot with the contractual issues of how teachers can and can't get cut. But what we do as leaders is we really promote, if it is a teacher that we're going to lose in our building, we are constantly promoting, to other buildings, saying this is a great teacher. We can't keep them here because we have budget cuts and they're lowest seniority. But I'll definitely call my colleagues and say, take them. They're fantastic.
So lots of work to do in that area.
Thank you. Somewhat related, you mentioned vacancies in schools that have historically had them. What has caused this, and how will MPS address this structural issue?
Yeah, I feel like I'm taking up all the time. Structural issues of...
I think Senior Officer Diop mentioned that there have been schools that had staff, not enough staff shortages, but those schools have historically had staff shortages. Is that an accurate summary?
Yeah, definitely. As we look at that, we need to look at, first of all, enrollment. Why are families choosing or not choosing to send their kids to those schools? I think we need to look at the programming that we have there. We need to look at how proficiency and growth is happening at that schools and what that looks like. And finally, we always need to look at who is at the school now, who's leading the school now, and how can we support them as they're moving forward. So I think as we look at it, this year particularly for me, I guess it's my first year, but it really is pronounced to me to see how those staffing vacancies landed at different schools, and I think we have yet to address the root causes of why that's happening, and we're going to have to do that through the budget this year.
Thank you. We're going to shift gears just a little bit. There's so many options. Okay, good. I don't know. Should you? I want to make sure that we hear from maybe the building level as well, teacher, principal. What will be the process for involving and/or informing affected communities that their local schools will be closed? Or is there any involvement from the building level on that?
I'm not sure yet.
Okay.
It's a tough
I
question.
mean, I'm hoping not your school, but if you have any thoughts about that one.
We definitely have thoughts about wanting to have, to be a part of the conversation. I think that students, staff, leaders, community members definitely want to be a part of the conversation. If a school is going to close, if it's not mine, if it's my peer's school, we want to be a part of that and share, similar to the Andersen process, like what are we going to, how are we going to be impacted as an Andersen school if Green closes? Those kinds of conversation. So, yeah, the request would be to be at the table and be collaborative.
I have a
Please.
a sort of question related to that about the timing, right? February, choice cards are due, right? That's when everybody's supposed to say, you want to go to this magnet or you want to go to your community school. When do we think this school transformation is going to happen at the level of building closures? And how soon are we going to get the word out to families in the community so that they can make a plan, right? I mean, for a long time, I was thinking this coming year, right, that there will be, next fall, there will be closed school, but maybe not, but people need to know sooner rather than later. People buy houses near schools because, they rent apartments near schools because they want to go to the school. And if, so what's the plan for that?
And I think to add to that, Andersen is a product of, well, a lot of schools are an impact of the comprehensive district design, but our school transitioned from a K-8 to a 6-8, and we basically had 85 to 90% turnover in students and staff. So we had a full year of understanding that impact and really having an exit strategy for our students and staff to go to other schools, like learning how to interview, write a resume, et cetera, knowing that their K-5 was closing. And then also bringing new staff in and new students in to really understand this new mission, vision, and core values of our school and to have that community. So as all of these changes are happening, how do we really bring our communities together to help them move on to another school or help them come into a community that's already established and really create that community and sense of belonging.
Thank you. Oh, yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
So I think it's a great question, and I think there have been lots of conversations about it. You've heard some of our board members talk about school transformation, meaning school closings. You hear some of them that talk about adding programs. So I think if you're watching the board meetings, which when I sit out there on Tuesday nights, I'm hoping there's a big crowd out there. But as you're listening to their conversations, we've been facilitating conversations with the board, the third one taking place last Tuesday, and really talking about what is a draft definition of what school transformation is. So they're still working on that. They gave us some feedback on that. I believe as we move forward and if we say that school transformation does mean we have to look at a consolidation of our schools or a school closing, if that's a decision that the board made, I will say technically, as I look at it, you have to have those decisions made the October before the next school year, because we have enrollment catalogs like you talked about. There are budget pieces to that. When you have school closings, there's often redistricting that happens, right? And I worry about the Minneapolis Public Schools community being ready to go through that again. So I was there for the comprehensive district design. I was not in all the conversations. I was over in special education, kind of having my own conversations about reimagining what I wanted special education to look like in the district. But I sat up on stage with those 400 plus community meetings, and we thinking that that was honest engagement? Absolutely not. So engagement has to look way different, and we need to have the conversations ongoing with our communities, and we have to understand all the unintended consequences that come with this. And it's going to be a really hard conversation. And I really hope that we have, as we continue to move forward as Minneapolis Public Schools, when I talk about a sense of belonging, that's so important because we are not going to be successful unless we have stability at the teacher level, at the parent level, at the student level, at the principal level, at the central office level. That stability and that historical knowledge that you talked about will help us get through. And that's never going to happen unless we build trust, relationships, and communication. Those three things are key, and you'll continue to hear me talk about that as we move forward into this discussion. But technically, when I think about it, it's really about an October. We need at least October through the next school year to make that decision happen.
Can I ask a question about October? There's a question in the pile that says, Senior Officer Diop, what's our October 1st MARS number? I don't know that term. Is this related to what we were just talking about?
Thank you for the question. The October 1st is that as a school district, we do have average daily membership. That's how we get our revenue. And that number, we take that count on October 1st. And last year, the year before, by October 2nd, we would have a number for you, for anybody. But this year, the district has started a new student information system, Infinite Campus. And because of that, we are still waiting to get that number that we technically and historically have received maybe a week before. And so this is a question that keeps coming, and I keep giving the same answer. And I hope that by next week, it will be a different answer, that we would have a solid number.
Okay, got it. Thank you. These insider terms, it's helpful to have them defined. There's a question for Amira, actually, related to staff cuts. Amira, this is a two-part question. How have staff cuts in the aftermath of the uprising impacted you and other students? Second part is, also, what support do students need?
So I was at South for like when the strike was happening, and we had a lot of staff and a lot of teachers who were fired and who were cut, and that did cause a lot of problems for all students, mainly for social workers, counselors, and for generally the staff who are on ground, who are basically like the support for all students. It was difficult because it does, like, if I want to talk to my counselor, I can't just go and talk to her. I would have to wait a period of time because a lot of students would want to go and talk to her as well. We didn't have any social works. The nurses were like one or two, and like I think that is also a lot for, like, managing like at least like 1,800 students compared to like one or two nurses is a lot, especially with COVID cases and stuff like that. So that I think caused a lot of problems, and a lot of students at MPS I think relate. Sorry, what was the second question?
The second part was, also, what supports do students need?
I said we need a lot of counselors, especially at the start of the new year when there is a lot of new schedules. A lot of students do like to line up at the front of the office and say, oh, I want this, I want this, I want this. And I can believe that's overwhelming for like one or the two or three counselors we have. I think we need social workers for the emotional support and all that for students who, especially after the COVID impact, struggle a lot with their emotions and all that. I think that's what social worker is for. I'm not sure. Nurses are also very important. I think that the average school should have like 4 nurses. That's what I think. And so with all that, I think that we need to have more staff retention and staff being brought in, and I'm not sure how that system works, so it might be hard to I can't say bring them in. So yeah, I think that's all the support that students need, and We need more teachers for core classes. We have a lot of, like, the class sizes are very big, very like small classes where like a lot of students, 30, 40, 45 students for each class, which is a lot. So it's hard to learn in such an environment. So I think that also needs to be something we need to discuss and do something about.
Thank you. Amira, I'm going to come back to you with this question, but I'd like to hear from Superintendent Cox and Senior Officer Diop too. This question says, I hear talk around the value of excellence in budget discussions or decisions, but what about equity and justice for students of color and students with disabilities? How can we center excellence and equity for students from here? And I'd like to hear from you on that too, Amira, if you have thoughts.
Yeah, it's a great question. And when you think about excellence and you think about equal versus equity, and that's why it's so important that these decisions are made at the school level, especially when I think about what students need, like you said. That's not a decision that I have a very good view of in my role, but I know the principal at South would have a very good role, and his site council would have a very good idea. I think I hope we make equity decisions all the time. So we recently just added transportation, which transportation, you think transportation's transportation. We just added transportation pilot at North High School. We don't transport our high school students. But when we looked at the safety concerns of students being able to be present for class and do that, that just made sense. When we looked at our new CTE center, which is going to be amazing, it has started amazing. But one of the things we found after we got it started was that students needed transportation every way, not just in between. So adding that on. So all those things that are equity focused, also we need to make divestments into something else. So we've gotten to a space, I believe at MPS, that we just can't keep adding. Like, I can spend money all day, like we all can, right? Like, give me more and I can find something amazing to do with it. But it's come to the time that we can't add anymore. We've got to make some really hard decisions about what we're going to take away while keeping equity for our students of color, for our students who receive special education services at the same time. And without that combo has to be there as we really make these hard decisions. Senior Officer Diop?
Yes, thank you, Superintendent, for studying that answer. I would say it is something that is a fundamental part of the budget process that we go through equity consideration. Any allocation that we make, then that has to be submitted to that process so that we make sure that it is equitable. And when we talk about equity in public school in the United States, it's usually referring to vertical equity, which means that different people situated in different levels are treated the same. That is faulty. And we try, as a state, I would say, I would give some credit to the state because they have done budgeting in a different state where the funding doesn't come categorized already. So we already have that. At the district, we go an extra 10 miles to do that. And I'll give an example because your question, I think, talks about special needs. I would add ELL, English Language Learners. The grant that we receive, federal, state combined, is about 6 million, 5 to 6 million. But the need is over 25 million. How do we meet that? If we were to do, if we didn't take equity into account, we would just say, hey, we received 6 million, we're going to distribute 6 million, and that's it. But we decided to add 25 million from our general fund to make sure that we meet the needs of each and every one of our students. The other piece would be in special ed. We did talk about a figure, $56 million was the cross-subsidy for special ed. What does that mean? In 1975, the federal government did take the responsibility to provide up to 40% of special education across the country. Today, I think that if it is at 17%, that would be great, because I don't think it is. So that shortfall is something that we are pulling from our general fund up to $56 million as of last year and the year before to cover for that. And now think a second here. We talked about a $33 million deficit, which we ended up closing without cutting that much. That was in 2018. That was $33 million. All my time at the district so far, I am yet to see a shortage, budget shortage, that would be over 56 million. So that means that if we didn't have to do that, we would not have had these shortages. And so there are many pieces like that. The superintendent talked about the triads. What is the role for, how important that investment is that we are actually meeting our students where they are to bring them up. We do have gifted and talented. We get an allocation for that. But we have made sure that every building that we have 0.5, I think the percentage is, in terms of FTE, full-time equivalency. So we're covering as much as we can to make sure that we are meeting the needs of all our students district-wide.
Yeah, I wanted to add a little bit more on the kind of the PAC Student Excellence part. I am a PAC, as you can see, but I've also been in, I think I got all the support and like all the resources that I need, but I think that's only because I went out of my way to ask, and that it hasn't been like something that has been like laid out in front of me and said, oh, this is all your options, this is all your resources. I had to go, and since 9th grade, I had to ask about PSEO, CIS, AP, all that. And I think that I was lucky to be able to do that myself, but a lot of PAC students aren't able to actually go out and do that themselves. I have been in a lot of AP classes at South and CIS classes as well, and even though we have a pretty good diversity and a lot of like we have like 30% white students and like 70%, I think, Black. That's the estimate. And like for all the AP and kind of advanced classes, all I've seen was a lot of white students compared to the PIPOC students, even though we have a lot of PIPOC students at school. Also, I think that's also part due to the staffing as well. We don't have a lot of POC teachers, a lot of POC staff, and we have, and with all kind of, with one budget cut to happen, and the teachers, the PIPOC teachers are fired or stuff like that. I'm not saying necessarily they're targeted, but if we are doing retention, if we're trying to keep them in, we should have a kind of protection in place for them so that we could keep them in place and hire them more. I think that there is a pathway program that I was part of, and I was happily able to go out and volunteer as a teacher and kind of see how it is. And I was able to see that a lot of students were happy that we had like a diverse body of students who are willing to go out and assist the teachers. But all I've seen was like that a lot of the kind of staff and teachers body were made out of white teachers rather than POC students, and this is kind of something we don't sit down and address because of how uncomfortable it is. So that's also one part, and I also wanted to add a little bit on the transportation. A lot of MPS high school students, buses are not provided, obviously. So either you have to get there by pickup, drop off, or take the bus or the train. As far as that goes, I think that is a bit unsafe because as soon as the kid goes out and leaves their home, their safety kind of falls onto the district. So when there's a lot of crackheads and a lot of things that's happening at the unsafe things that's happening at the buses and the trains, I think we should have a safety measure put in place for student protection and all that. So that is also something I wanted to discuss. Yeah, that's all.
Thank you, Amira. Quickly, there was a question that kind of is tied in with what Amira just talked about how missing no teachers for advanced students taking advanced placement classes. Quickly, that was one of the gaps that was identified. What's the vision for that, for supporting those students? Anybody?
About transportation?
No, just in general, students taking advanced classes, advanced students. What's the vision for supporting them? That was one of the gaps identified. Oh, you.
What that I talked about?
Yeah.
Advanced
yeah.
learners, yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we saw that as being a gap. We had a certain model that we had before where teachers actually provided the service. And my opinion is we ask a heck of a lot of our teachers, right? We ask them to service advanced learners. We ask them to differentiate the core. Before, we were asking them to do what I call tier 2 services, or those services that you might need that extra scoop of instruction. We're asking all that of a classroom teacher, and then we say, and by the way, we're giving you some new curriculum to do too. So it was a lot. So by adding the extra money last year, we were really trying to take that out of the classroom teachers needing to provide that and bringing in an allocation for that. So that's how we anticipated closing the gap this year.
Thank you. We are rapidly approaching the end of our time. There's a couple questions about budget tie-out. There are questions about support from the school board. The thing that I think kind of maybe ties all this together is, when will the budget deficit be solved? What is the vision for or plan for this? Who is responsible for executing this? Seems like this has been a problem since 2016.
Again, thank you for the question, and I think I indirectly answered that question as to why we've been talking about this since 2016, and not have done a whole lot about that. Because after 2016, we were saying in 2016 that in 3 to 4 years from now, we would have to face a fiscal cliff. Then the pandemic hit, and we received federal dollars. Not only did we get 259 or so million from the federal government, we were on a regular basis. We would have vacancy rates that would be around 3 to 5%, but being in excess of 10% meant that there is a lot of money unspent that we would put into fund balance. And when we say fund balance, we have a requirement from the board, and it's one of the statutes that we have, not statute, but requirements that we have from the board to maintain a fund balance of 8%. And for a long time, we've been operating with a fund balance that was under 8%. So in 2016-17, we put it at 8%, and it's been there ever since. And so that means that the reflex that I have personally is that if I see money laying around, I would put it into fund balance. All right? Because my role is not to only manage today. It is to look at yesterday, making sure that today is fine, but more so than anything else, that tomorrow is even more radiant. And the way to do that is to be very, I would say, intentional in building reserves. And the reserve is not built to do anything else but to meet the future expenses of the district.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay. I kind of want to ask one for everybody, but I'd like folks in the middle, folks on the ground, to answer this one. As we talk about the future, as we think about what's coming up, Question came in that says, how will a new superintendent be able to be successful given the financial and other challenges? Teresa, you mentioned dreaming, being able to dream together. And I feel like this is an opportunity for you all to do a little dreaming about the new superintendent and voice those wishes now.
I think I'm just going to go back to my statement in the beginning is the answer is in the room. You know, my former students, the current parents, the parent of the daycare, you know, that I attended with my children, it's in the room. Let's be creative. Let's dream big. Let's think about a future. Look at the data, see where we're successful and maintain, and where we're not successful, what do we need to edit and do better? But the answer is here. It's not one person. It's going to be a collaborative conversation for that superintendent to engage with in many places.
I'll just add, we need to make sure the right people are in the room, right? That we bring more people in. Maybe I'll just sort of keep going back to that point that we need to make sure that the right people are at the table.
Yeah, we were talking as we were doing the little 2-minute dance, and I think one of the questions that she asked me was, you know, what is your turnout for surveys? And I originally said, not great. And then I changed my answer and I said, actually, that's incorrect. I get great response, but from white families. And so what we do at Andersen, and we're still learning, we can do better, we interrupt different spaces. So if there's a choir concert or a band event or a basketball game or a soccer game, we go to those families and we ask questions informally to one-on-one, small groups, conferences, et cetera, et cetera. So finding the spaces where you can get those answers even when it's not planned. And again, we can do better, but we're trying. We're trying different ways to really get that feedback from our stakeholders.
I'd be really interested, you know, there's a lot of questions that the district has to answer. And maybe they need to answer them first before they come to you in a building administration. But somehow being able to, because since you already have those connections, to be able to get you to help pull people into those higher level conversations that are happening. Because I don't, right, my kids are in elementary school. I don't feel a lot of that right now, right? That my school is telling me, you need to go and pay attention to that thing that's happening over there.
Great advice, thank you.
Anyone? Yeah, go ahead, Amira.
Yeah, so I also wanted to say that for us to be successful, we could like sit here, talk all we want, you know, kind of talk about the important topics, but I feel like we also need to stand up and take action. For us to kind of see progress is for us to kind of take the first step, even if we don't know what the outcome would be. That is how kind of dreams or like all progress and success happens. I also had a quick question for principal. When it comes to parent and teacher communication, how do you deal with parents who don't speak the language but still want to be involved with their students and be active in the school community?
Great question, and it's something that I deal with daily. We are a dual language site. 70% of our students' families speak Spanish, and so we are constantly looking for ways to engage these families. We are reaching out to specific family members in our community to say, what works for you? How do you want to engage with us? So our first 2 years, we did just direct communication in the ways that we thought was best, and that was not working. So now we are learning the different apps that we can use, the phone calls that we can do, the showing up at the soccer game that we can have, and we hire educators, clerical staff, associate educators, et cetera, that speak the language so that they can be supportive of our families.
That's good.
Excellent. Last quick question, quick answers from everybody. Oh dear, there it is. Where did it go? I lost the question. There it is. How can our community better support you all inside MPS? What would you wish for?
I would say the best thing would be to be engaged, because I know that most of the time, this is, for finance, we put financial statements, and I know that not everybody would have the same understanding to ask the right questions, which would keep us on our toes, right? And so just coming to a finance committee meeting, which sometimes it's only staff that is there, I think participation, challenging us. If you have any questions, to give us a call. My team and I are ready to meet you anywhere, and we are that flexible to talk with you and share the information in a way that is understandable. And so I think that participation is key.
Something that you said earlier tonight really resonated with me, and that's staying positive. So we are going to experience, I think I even said this to you, like I feel like I'm standing in the eye of the hurricane right now. Like, I'm going to have to go outside of that, and it's going to be traumatic. And do it together, stay positive, we got this, persevere, and celebrate the good things. We oftentimes highlight the negative experience that we have, and they exist, and we need to do better. That is definitely a thing. But there are so many wonderful things that are happening in our district. And so if you see a student do something great, highlight it. If you see a building engaging in something fantastic, highlight it. Share it on social media, share it with a friend, invite them to an event. We are doing amazing things in Minneapolis Public Schools, and we need to showcase that everywhere we go. Because we are an amazing district, and we're proud of the things that we're doing.
I think I would add, I'm going to combine the last question in my answer too about the superintendent I'm dreaming about. So I think first, there's a lot of power in a good question. So let's keep asking the question. And then I think second, I want to see us follow the lead of the young people. I was in Dare to Be Real classroom, and students were co-creating classroom norms. And one young man said, Ms. Gloppen, teachers should not send a child on a break, because then, what are they going to learn? They're not even in the room. What a silly, routine to have. So then the child, created a norm about what it means to, show up for each other and ask questions and trust and fail. And I was like, when can I come work for you? So I really, truly believe, too, our young people have answers to the big, scary questions. I think we just need to listen to them more.
Anyone else?
Oh, I think.
You good?
Yeah, I'm good.
Okay, all right. So for me, I'd just like to add on to the engagement piece. I would love, and seeing all of you show up, thank you. This is engagement with MPS, and this is why we're here, so thank you for that. But I also believe that a healthy school district is part of a healthy city. So as we look at the Minneapolis city, it's important that we pay attention to the health of our city. I don't want to have to make decisions about whether to spend money on safety or spend money on instruction, right? I want to stay and understand my scope in education. I will go out of scope for my students, but a healthy city and that interdependence with that in its school district, I think, is something we all need to pay attention to.
Thank you all. There's a pile of questions here. Superintendent Cox, I'm going to give you those. I really hope you'll take a moment. Am I here? Okay. Really hope you'll take some time to follow up with those questions, because we have come to the end of our evening. And there's a bunch of things that I have to say really quick. One of them is about the follow-up materials that will come after the event. So, first of all, thank you for your great questions, everyone. I'm sorry that we didn't get to them, but as you saw, you were all witnesses. I handed them to Superintendent Cox. Thanks again to our incredible presenters and panelists, Superintendent Rochelle Cox, Senior Officer Ibrahima Diop, Amira Ali, FitzGerald, Teresa Gloppen, Brianna, who is not here, and Elleni Fellows. And thank you all for joining us this evening. You've been a great audience. We hope you'll take a minute before you leave tonight to register for our next EDTalks. That's happening on November 13th, where Dr. Rose Chu, Joshua Crossan, and Haven Gebergergish We'll discuss the systemic teacher shortage in Minnesota and how we can attract, hire, and retain diverse teachers who love their jobs. So lots of questions about that tonight. Join us next time. Please also complete the short event survey. It really does help make EDTalk stronger. Find QR codes on your tables. I believe there's somewhere there. I can't see it, but it's there. Yeah, that thing, yeah. You'll receive a follow-up email with event videos and other resources, so please keep an eye out for that and share it with anyone who wasn't able to join us this evening. Once again, thank you to our generous co-sponsor and funder, Graves Ventures. I probably did it. I probably bent the cord and I shouldn't have. We encourage you to connect with Achieve and Graves Ventures to learn about all the great things they're doing in our community and how you can get connected and engaged. Thank you so much again to Ice House for this incredible venue. This is our official EDTalks home. I'm always happy to come back here. And on behalf of all the EDTalks team, Heidi, who's hiding down there, who makes all this happen, thanks to each and every one of you tonight. Have a great night.